Hello friends everyone. In this issue I will show my next experiment. I'll try to brew non-alcoholic beer at home, at this brewery. I've been wanting to try brewing non-alcoholic beer for a long time. I had never cooked it before. I read a bunch of recipes on the internet and watched a lot of videos on YouTube. Many authors offer different cooking methods. As a test, I chose a simpler method. Now let's check what comes out of this. Let's go through the recipe. I will use 2 kilograms. Caramel malt for kilograms. Pale ale malt and 1 kilogram of Munich malt type 2. In total, we will get 7 kilograms. Malt. I will use 2 types of hops for bitterness. I will use 10 grams. Simcoe hops and 90 grams will go into the main grist. Hops to select for fermentation. I will use 11 grams of LE yeast Fale SO for I will use 45 liters of mash water and 32 liters of sparge water. I'll tell you briefly the procedure. I will pour the malt at 50 degrees and immediately heat the mash to 70 degrees. Thereby, we will slightly affect the protein break. I will immediately heat it to 70 because we need non-fermentable sugars, but we don't need alcohol in beer. I will pause for 60 minutes. Then I heat it up to 78 degrees for the mash out tea. Afterwards, I pour it into the intermediate boiler, wash the boiler and begin the boiling process. I'll tell you how I plan to ferment it a little later. Before starting brewing, I will wash the brewery and carry out the necessary disinfection. This process is almost completely automated for me and practically does not require my participation. In the meantime, I'll start grinding the malt. Grinded the malt and disinfected the equipment. Now I'll program the automation. I will set the first temperature pause at 55 degrees for 5 minutes. As I already said, I will pour malt on it. This time, I think, should be enough for me. Our next break is 70 degrees for 60 minutes. Well, tritium, last pause 78 degrees for 5 minutes. That's it. We can assume that the automation is programmed. Now you can start pouring water. And here I had a little difficulty. 45 liters of water was not enough to cover the sensor, and I had to pour 75 liters of water. Now you will need to recalculate and grind the amount of malt for a new volume of water and increase the amount of hops. While the water is heating up, I grind the missing amount of malt. There wasn't enough pale ale, so I had to add Pilsner. The temperature in the boiler reached 55 degrees. The malt began to fall asleep. I came to the second pause at 70 degrees. This is what the process looks like. 60 minutes have passed. We are approaching the third pause, the mash out. The process is underway. All pauses have been completed. The mashing process is completed. I'm waiting for the filter layer to form. The wort will become lighter and will be poured into an intermediate container. The density of the wort before washing was about 7 units. Started pouring into the intermediate container. Boil the wash water. I wash the kettle. Now I'll pour the wort back into the kettle and start boiling. I added 10 grams of hops. Cook for another 60 minutes. The temperature in the boiler is 95 degrees. There are 20 minutes left before the end of boiling. I connected a counterflow chiller to a closed circuit for disinfection with boiling wort. Finished cooking. Began the process of cooling and pouring into fermenters. Now I'll pour it, add yeast and put it in the refrigerator. I'll set the temperature to about 17 degrees. While the beer is fermenting, I will take samples and wait for the gravity to drop to 5 units. After this, I will lower the temperature to 0 degrees and leave the beer in the refrigerator for 24 hours. This will completely stop fermentation. Then I'll transfer it to secondary fermentation using gelatin. Gelatin will allow the yeast to bind and settle at the bottom. 4 days later, carbonated the beer with carbon dioxide. This is what we ended up with. This is the beer. What can I say as a result? I do not recommend repeating this experiment. I was unable to withstand all the technological stages of fermentation in the refrigerator, namely, cool it to 0 degrees. So it didn't turn out quite what I expected. The beer turned out empty, without fullness of taste. Next time, a little later, I will try to repeat the experiment, but I will ferment it in ACCT with a cooling jacket. Well, I think we can finish here. Bye everyone. See you again.